The ideal encyclopedia should be radical. It should stop being safe.
To get trust, give trust. If you say to someone, I trust you, that actually creates a mood in that person. It creates a willingness to trust back and to live up to that trust.
Your daughter Kira's birth. She's born and faced some challenges. That actually helped spur you to want to create Wikipedia.
We had a group of people who were excited and loved the vision, a free encyclopedia for everybody. Given that Wikipedia went from this completely crazy idea that nobody could believe and kind of considered to be a joke to one of the things people trust, and that actually turns out to be quite important in this era of really rather unpleasant social media.
How active are you updating, creating new articles?
It's too big a deal if I go in and edit something. So too many people are like, oh my God, is he trying to tell us something? Is this a symbolic, what is it? The rules of trust aren't just like a lot of good words. You actually have to walk the walk. It's a common kind of saying is, once you've broken trust, that's it. You can never get it back. But no, is it really true? No, it's actually not true.
Wikipedia, on the other hand, begins with a very radical idea.
Jimmy, man, it's awesome to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So let's go back a few years to 1969. You're 3 years old. Your mom buys you a World Book Encyclopedia from a door-to-door salesman. And I read that young Jimmy became obsessed with those volumes, and you even updated them. Tell me about this time. You're only 3 years old, and you're already creating Wikipedia then?
Oh, well, I don't think I did any updating when I was three. I was only learning to read when I was four. So I don't know. Probably I looked at some pictures when I was three, but yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of a joke, really, but the World Book Encyclopedia it was quite common to sell to parents, door-to-door salespeople. And of course, if you buy it when your kid's three, because you're all excited about, the future, then in a few years' time, some of the articles are out of date. And so they would send out the annual update. So once a year, you would get the 1974 update. And then they would sometimes update articles. So, for example, they had to update the article on the moon because we'd had the moon landing. And so then they would give you these stickers, and you could go through the stickers, and it would say, you put it in next to moon, you would put see update in 1974 annual. So I would do that with my mom. And so I always joke that was my first update of the encyclopedia.
How did that experience and obsessing over revising it impact you as you grew up?
Well, I mean, it didn't seem that important at the time because I didn't know I was going to do this. So it was just a thing. I did look forward to it every year when the thing would come in. But, loving the encyclopedia. And of course, later I found out about Encyclopedia Americana, which was another brand, and Encyclopedia Britannica, which everybody knows. Because World Book is really for kids, and these are, the more adult encyclopedias. But just loving that idea that you could go and look anything up that you're interested in. And, as a kid, you didn't know anything about anything really. So you would be like, oh, tigers. I wish I knew more about tigers. And you go and you look and like, oh, great. There's a whole article about tigers. I'm going to read that. So I think that early love of, quite random, diverse knowledge is part of what's, meant I would enjoy working on an encyclopedia.
So let's fast forward a few years to your daughter Kira's birth. Am I pronouncing her name right? Kira?
Kira, yeah.
Kira. So she's born and faced some challenges immediately, right as she's born. And your doctor comes to you saying, Jimmy, to you and Kira's mom, hey, we want to do this. I don't know if it's an experiment, but a different type of procedure that could potentially help her. And you're in the hospital scrambling around. I don't know, how am I supposed to make this decision? I don't have the necessary information, right? And so can you walk me through that experience and how that actually helped spur you to want to create Wikipedia?
Yeah, so at that time, we had been working on Newpedia, which was a predecessor project, which wasn't that innovative, really. It was, we would recruit academics to write articles, and you had to send in your CV showing you were qualified and so forth before you could write anything. It wasn't working at all. We had very, very slow progress, not much coming out. And I was really on the verge of giving up. I'm like, well, like I can't afford to see this through. At this rate, it's going to be, forever before we get anywhere. And then, when Kira was born, and I just realized, like, actually, you go on the internet and you've got a question like, what is this condition my daughter have? Should I have this treatment? Like, what do I need to learn quickly? And it wasn't there. The only things there were either, sort of random blogs and things like that, or academic journal articles you might be able to find, which were way above my head, as they often can be, which means I could read it, but would I really come to a good understanding? Probably not. I don't have the context. So, so I was just like, you know what, we got to get this done. We got to do this. And just before this, lovely guy, Jeremy, had one of my employees, Jeremy Rosenfeld, he had shown me this wiki thing that we'd seen online. And it was like, oh, this is interesting. It's just like a website and anybody can edit it. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe we could use that because clearly this top-down approach with a 7-stage review process before you publish anything, that's no fun and nobody's doing it. And maybe there's a better way and we've got to try something. So put it up. So Kira was born on December 26th, and I opened Wikipedia on January 15th.
Wow.
And I just downloaded this open source wiki software, UseMod Wiki it was called, and just installed it. It was a Perl script. It was quite simple. And we called it Wikipedia because we were afraid the Newpedia academics, they're all very serious academics, were like, well, they're going to freak out. They're not going to like this because it's just too wide open. Turns out a lot of them did like it. Like nobody really had a problem with it. And yeah, and it took off quite quickly. But partly because we'd spent 2 years trying to get this Newpedia thing off the ground. And so we had a group of people who were excited and loved the vision, a free encyclopedia for everybody. That, particularly at this time, I would say this was sort of the height of the dot-com frenzy. And all kinds of crazy stuff were going on, and people just thought, yeah, this sounds great, we should have this.
So do you think initially one of the biggest differences is what created why Wikipedia took off and Newpedia didn't, meaning it was a speed thing? Because I'm thinking back to then, or to just in general, when you think of ideas, hey, let's have strangers drive you around in cars. Obviously, where no one would ever do that. That won't work. And that works, right? Let's just have anyone be able to edit, update, write, publish, and that be kind of seen as facts. That will never work. Of course not. And yet here we are. Right.
Yeah.
So I would just love to hear your mindset. Like, did you even have doubts of, wait a second, anybody can edit it? Are we sure we want to do this? Why would anyone trust that? Well, we're going to talk a lot about trust today. Why would anyone trust this thing that anybody can go up and literally write whatever they want?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so certainly in the very beginning, we had this small community, very eager people. And I was like, you know what, let's just put it up. Let's just start sketching around, start to write stuff. Clearly, we thought, obviously, we're going to have some mechanism. We're going to have to figure out, like, who's the editor-in-chief of the chemistry section, right? You're going to have some kind of authority and hierarchies and so on and so forth. And so just assumed that would happen. But because of the experience of Newpedia, which did have sort of very top-down structure, I thought, well, let's just not have too much structure for as long as possible. And if we need to solve a problem by adding in some structure, then we'll do that. But for now, let's just get started. Like, we've got a lot of good people. They're trustworthy people. I've known them for a couple of years online, and they're, ready to get stuff done. And it's also fun. Like I knew from very early on, it was really fun. Like there was a point in time when you could be the first person to like create a page, Paris. You would just write maybe Paris is the capital of France, and you hit save, and you're like, ah, look at that. That's amazing. It's not much of an encyclopedia article, obviously, but it was fun. It's like, oh, like we can just start documenting whatever we know. And so people started just doing all kinds of stuff. And then some people would go dig in and like read a really long article, and other people would just go around sort of saying, "Oh, let's add a short entry for every country in the world," or something like that. And so it was immediately apparent. And part of this was I had been working before this. I had been working on a PhD in finance, and I therefore knew a lot. I'd worked in Chicago in the markets, and I had published a paper on option pricing theory. And I thought, oh, well, look, Robert Merton had recently won the Nobel Prize in economics for his work in option pricing theory. And I thought, oh, well, great. I mean, I can write a short biography of him. And as soon as I started, it was like this heavy, heavy weight because I knew they were going to take my first draft and send it to the most prestigious finance professors they could find to give me feedback and notes. And suddenly it was very intimidating. It was very hard. It's like, oh my God, I feel like I'm back in grad school again, where I'm going to turn in this thing and professors are going to, critique it. And it's just no fun. Like that doesn't sound like fun. Like grad school is not fun. Like you do it because you've got this objective at the end, and you may do it because the subject matter is interesting, but that piece of it, right, sort of being judged for your work and all that, that not fun. And so instead, you could just write, um, Robert Merton, is an economist. He works at the university. He won the Nobel Prize in economics for his work on option pricing. You write a few facts down and you hit save, and it's not very good yet. But, what was cool is that you go back a few days later and you see, oh, somebody dug in and they added more information and they added the titles of some of his papers and da 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 da. And so that element has always been really important. That element of, is it fun? Like, do you enjoy the activity? Do you meet interesting people? Is it a nice place to be? And that actually turns out to be quite important in this era of really rather unpleasant social media,
Yeah.
which I know I have been as much of a Twitter addict as anybody, although I pretty much try to stay off of it for the most part these days. But is it fun? Well, I mean, it's only fun in the sense of, you got to correct all these idiots, right? Or that sort of aggressive fun. Actually, no, you're not really, feeling good about things. And, you know, I always say, you spend one afternoon, you've picked some topic in Wikipedia, you found a short entry that wasn't very good, and you added a few facts and you read a couple of articles. And then you're like, okay, well, that was kind of cool. But then you also think, you know what? The world's just ever so slightly better. Like somebody's
Yeah.
going to read that, and I'm glad. Like that's cool.
The when you create this environment though with a lot of freedom, independence, trust,
Mm,
unfortunately, there are bad actors in the world.
mm.
And even though we lead with trust, which I do, and we'll go even deeper on this in a second. And I love giving trust before it's earned, as do you, and as you did have done with Wikipedia. But how do you manage the bad actors? How do you manage the people that, for whatever reason, they're cynics and they just don't want to see things work, or they like to enrage, right? Like Twitter, the algorithms and how they're created, they incentivize that, which really bums me out because I feel like it did used to be an amazing place to learn. How do you deal with the bad actors in the world? How do you deal with the ones who don't lead with trust, the ones who don't deserve your trust, even though you're willing to give it before they've earned it?
Yeah, I mean, what I think you have to do, and this kind of applies in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, one way to even sort of help yourself think about it is think about how you normally act in real life. And as we know, out of every take 1,000 people, you know, probably a small handful of them are going to be really annoying, right? They're just annoying. They're probably not actually bad actors. They're probably not actively malicious. They're just like, oh my God, this person's really annoying. But that's all right, whatever. It takes all kinds and so forth. But it's really rare to have somebody who's actually malicious, actually super problematic, at least in the default assumption. And so the idea of assume good faith, as we call it in Wikipedia, that, as you say, extending trust first as a starter before it's been earned, right? You don't approach people with a sense of mistrust. Um, it's conditional, right? You extend that sort of friendly hand of trust, and if the person proves themselves to be super problematic, then you've got to not be naive. You've got to deal with it. So in Wikipedia's context, it's like, if you come into Wikipedia and you vandalize, hopefully the first thing that happens is you just get a little note on your talk page saying, knock it off. Like, hey, that's not what we do here. I saw your vandalism. If you do it more, you're going to get blocked, but, why don't you do something better? And, that often works really well. I mean, we tell the story in the book of Kaylana, who's a great Wikipedian who, when she was very young, her first edited Wikipedia was vandalism, and then somebody was nice to her after she vandalized Wikipedia, and she felt so bad that she kind of she realized at some point she needed to sort of make it up, and became this great Wikipedian who really has been a driving force in writing about female scientists and getting more people excited about that subject matter. So the assumed good faith is actually quite practical. It's to say, like, okay, look, probably most people, even somebody who's done something, wrong, they're either mistaken or they're young and just having a lark or whatever. They're probably not horrible people. Then eventually, there are people who you just have to block, and you just have to say, you know what, you're not here to build an encyclopedia, and it's fine if what you want to do is get in massive arguments and yell at people. You know, I don't know if you've heard of Elon Musk, but he's got this great website for yelling at people, and it's right over there called X. Just go knock yourself out. It's a great spot. But if you want to write an encyclopedia, and if you're feeling better after a few days, come on back, and yeah, let's get going.
Maybe a weird question. How active are you on like updating, creating new articles, fixing ones that were maybe they're a little off? Like, are you active at all? A
Not
lot?
not
Medium?
not zero, but not that much.
Okay.
I probably should do it more, and the main reason I should do it more is because it's it's too big a deal if I go in and edit something. So too many people are like, "Oh my God, what's Jimbo doing?" And that's what they call me, Jimbo. I'm like, Is he trying to tell us something? Is this a symbolic? What is it?" It's like, no, I just saw something I wanted to edit. But yeah, sometimes I do. I used to do it more, but I'm actually very busy right now with the launch of my book coming up, which we've been implicitly talking about. I don't think we've actually mentioned it yet.
Yes, the 7 rules of trust. I want to get to these 7 rules in a second, but I do want to go to back to that time right after Kira was born. So it
Mm.
was shortly after, and interesting thing about trust of when you launched it. So in 2001, roughly 50% of Americans said that they trusted the federal government to do what is right always or most of the time. This is heartbreaking. In 2023, that number went from half to 16%.
Mm.
Man, what what
Yeah.
happened? Why? What I
I
mean, maybe
mean,
that takes two
yeah.
hours to explain, but what happened?
It does. I mean, and that first number, I just heard you say it, and I remember from the book, but make sure I got it right. That's 2000.
Yeah. You wrote 2001 in the book, but yes.
2001,
Yeah.
2001. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's really important to say, it's quite easy to look at a number like that and go, Donald Trump. Like Donald Trump, he, he says things, he contradicts himself, he contradicts facts, all of the things. But I think that's a little bit lazy, right? Because these are actually longer term trends. And in fact, the cause and effect between politicians, and I don't just mean Donald Trump, I mean a lot of politicians who aren't trustworthy, as it turns out, and our lack of trust and this decline of trust in society, those actually are causes of each other, right? In other words, why do we put up with politicians who we don't trust? Like, why on earth would you vote for a politician you don't trust? And, many times you look at an election, you're like, I don't trust either of these characters. Um, and so, it's too simple to lay it at the hands of any one person or any one event. And I think it has to do with a lot of things. There are a lot of different elements that have led to it. I mean, one of the things that's happened is the business model of journalism got really, really hard, still is really, really hard. And so, the traditional model for your local newspaper, it was pretty straightforward. You write the paper, you've got these different sources of revenue, you've got your subscriptions, to get the paper delivered, you've got your classified ads, and you've got your display ads. So those three pillars, good, strong business model. You could afford to do journalism. The journalism brought in readers. All of this is like it all worked. And then pretty quickly, right, the classified ads went away completely. That, you got eBay, you got Craigslist. I don't think anybody thinks, you know, I mean, I remember when I was 16 in Alabama, and I'm like, I've got a few bucks from my parents. I'm going to buy a car. And you go to the classified ads in the newspaper and you look for used. Nobody shops that way anymore. The classified ads don't exist. And then subscriptions. Oh, guess what? Yep, I get my news online. I get it for free. Or if I pay for something, I'm probably not paying for the local paper, right? I'm probably paying for the New York Times or a magazine or some bigger publication. And then the display ads, well, they're still there, but car dealer ads in the local grocery stores, but it's not enough money, and therefore the papers kind of sucks because they had to let go all the journalists, and it just becomes like a death spiral.
Mm.
And there have been some experiments, and some things are working in some places, but that decline of local media, that was a piece of it. I think also in more recent times, I would say the toxicity of social media, that's a problem. The existence of those bad actors who are clearly out almost as much to just undermine trust as they are to push any particular agenda. And, that. And then we also have seen, going back to the journalism piece, like a lot of news outlets have become significantly more partisan,
Mhm.
significantly more on the left or on the right, because they're kind of trying to find a way to have a business model, and at least with a little bit of rage headlines, you can get some clicks, and that gets you some money in the short run, while meanwhile possibly undermining people's trust in you in the long run. So it's not a really sustainable business model. And then, of course, whatever, we've got bad politicians who've, here in the UK where I live now, quite famously, it came out that there's this really emotionally touching picture of the Queen when her husband died. So Prince Philip died, and she's there in Westminster Abbey for the funeral, and literally she's sitting alone. They've got all the seats around her cleared because they didn't want the Queen to get COVID, obviously. And so you're like, wow, I mean, this is tough. Her family is not around her. And she was pretty isolated during that time in the palace. They were really careful with her. Um, and then what came out was, well, at Downing Street the night before, they were having a party against all the rules that they had imposed on the country. So you're kind of like, yeah, okay, this is not okay. This is not, they're not behaving in a trustworthy manner. And that just undermines people's confidence in the government. And that's the UK government. So the trend, you mentioned the polling data for the US, it's actually more global than that. And it's not everywhere, but it's quite common. And so my sense, and this is part of the motivation for writing the book, is like, let's not forget what we've lost. Let's try and bring back a culture of trust. Let's try to hold people accountable. Let's try to find the ways of rebuilding trust in society. And, given that Wikipedia went from this completely crazy idea that nobody could believe and kind of considered to be a joke to one of the things people trust, not perfectly, and they shouldn't trust it perfectly. And Wikipedia's got its problems and things like that. But broadly, people are like, yeah, you know what, Wikipedia's all right. Like, there's a lot of stuff out there that's definitely not all right, but Wikipedia's all right. They're doing their best, and that's really good. And so now, how do we spread that spirit everywhere?
and and that's what I think the 7 rules of trust, your latest book, could help with. So let's get personal, and then also talk about how this could work on a grander scale. So I'm going to go through like conversations I have had. So I got lucky to meet with Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great and Great by Choice. He's one of my heroes
Mm.
many years ago. And one of the things that he wrote about in one of his recent books was about making the trust wager. So you can either kind of show up cynical, forcing people to make go through all these hoops in order to for you to trust them, or you can just trust them from the start without making them do anything. And he argues that it's a more enjoyable, better life to make that trust wager, even though every once in a while you get burned. And so I try to live that way, like meaning like if I meet you for the first time, I trust you. If I hire you, if I'm working with you, if even with my keynote speaking business or all that, I send invoices after I'm done, expenses, everything's afterwards. Like I don't make people pay in advance. I trust you, right? We don't have a contract, but we just made an agreement that I'm going to come work for you for a little bit and you're going to pay me. And I've never been burned, honestly, never been burned. And when I bring that up to some people, some who may be a little bit more cynical, they say, "Oh, just wait, you'll change. Maybe you get a little bit older. Maybe you have a little bit more life repetitions. You'll turn on that. You will change your mind once you've lived enough life." And I'm like, I think I've lived enough life. I'm over 40 years old. I've lived enough life, and I don't want that to be true. I don't think that it's true. I don't feel like when I read the 7 rules of trust, I don't think you think that's true.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you say to those cynics who look at me like I'm some little kid because I think it's good to lead with trust or good to let them pay afterwards because I trust that they'll do it, even though we don't have a contract. It's just their word. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things to say. So, uh, first of all, I think most of those people, when they go to a steakhouse, a restaurant with steaks, and they sit right next to complete strangers who've got deadly weapons in their hands, sort of aggressively sawing on some meat, they trust that those people aren't going to stab them, right? Like we do trust people every day. Every time you get in a car and you're driving down the street, you've got a huge amount of trust in all the people around you driving their cars, and that they, for whatever reason, self-interest, but also just being decent human beings, they aren't going to crash into you. Now, obviously, crashes happen. Obviously, bad drivers happen. But broadly, if we think about it as that wager, right, the odds are good. The odds are in your favor. But I think there's a deeper point, and that's, one of the rules that we come up with in the book, 7 Rules of Trust, is uh, to get trust, give trust. And actually, one of the things about giving trust, if you say to someone, you know, like, I trust you, just that act of saying I trust you, or in not every context does it make clear. I mean, you don't always have to say it out loud. It's kind of obvious in most cases, but in those cases where you say, you know what, I trust you. I know many people wouldn't in this context, but I trust you. That actually creates a mood in that person. It creates a willingness to trust back and to live up to that trust. You kind of break that expectation, that cynicism, and you're like, most people are like, great, you trust me. So employees you mentioned, right? If you've got a new employee, that is a good time to sit down and say, you know, like, okay, first day on the job, and let me tell you what kind of manager I am. I'm not going to be on your back all the time. I'm not going to be micromanaging every single thing you do because I trust you. I trust you're gonna give it your best. I trust you're gonna make judgment calls. You know what? You're new. You're gonna make some errors, but I'm gonna trust that you're gonna do it as best you can. Make an error, that's all right. You know what? You're learning, and I'll be okay with that. And you violate my trust, right? Then we're gonna have a different story, but that's where we're gonna start from, is you're gonna have autonomy, you're gonna be treated as a proper human being, and I trust you're gonna do a great job for me. I mean, most people would die to have a boss like that. Like that's fantastic,
Doesn't
right? To
that
have
sound so
somebody.
basic though? Like that sounds like
It's
it's
so
obvious.
basic.
It's
It's
so I
so
was like, well,
basic.
obviously
And
that's what we should do. It's
go
obvious. You know what I mean?
go yeah, go sort of randomly looking through Reddit, right? And you'll see a lot of people, sort of people talking about the company they work for or the boss they work for, and they've got a really negative attitude. And I think in some cases they need to work on their own attitude, but in other cases they've got that attitude because they've got a boss who's basically a jerk. And, it's sort of like, like they're putting spyware on my computer because they don't trust me to work from home without spying on all my clicks. I mean, that's just a ridiculous practice.
Oh,
And in the short run, In the short run, yeah, you probably people sit up straight and they get the job done a little bit better. In the long run, they're all, the minute they log out at the end of the day, they're logging to the personal computer and they're looking for a job because they're like, these people aren't treating me like a proper person, so this isn't okay. So that that to get back to your question, like it's like it's a good bet. Like most people are basically decent, but it also creates that environment where trustworthy behavior is rewarded, and people love that. And
Yep.
as a boss, like what, wouldn't it be fantastic if, you feel like in any position, like I've got to go off and do this other thing, but I just trust my people are so good. They're going to just crack on with the work, right? They're going to make judgment calls. Sometimes they'll make a call. I would have made it differently. That's okay. They're smart. Sometimes they're going to get better than I did. Brilliant. That's exactly what you want in any kind of organization. And to build that kind of culture rather than a low trust culture, I think it's really a recipe for success.
It sounds so basic, but it takes me back to a moment earlier in my career. I was a VP of sales at a big company, Jimmy, and the boss that hired me got fired, and they brought in somebody else. And he was there for a few months at this time, and I had an open position in one of my management roles, so I was both looking for a new manager as well as that person had open positions like as sales reps. And so I was doing both. I was like acting manager to hire sales reps and looking for a manager. And I made an offer to as VP of sales, running a 500 million plus revenue
Mhm.
organization. I made an offer to a rep who didn't have as much experience as we would normally like, but was brilliant. Like had all of the athlete work ethic, super smart, had it all. Like checked every box except for the experience one. I offered him in writing. HR signed off the whole deal. And he came back to me and looked at it and said he doesn't have enough experience. You can't offer that guy. I might go, what are you talking about? I go, well, I already did, so we're past that point. And then he goes, no, he didn't have enough
Yeah.
experience. You can't offer him. I go, did you talk to him? Did you see him? Did you? And he goes, no, I don't need to. He didn't have no experience. And I said, blank his name. You have to trust me. I'm telling you, this is a good hire. I believe in it with every ounce of my being. And he goes, I'll never ever forget this moment, Jimmy. He goes, you haven't earned my trust.
Oh,
Renege on the offer. I go, I
oh,
can't renege on the offer. That's not. I gave him my word. It's in writing. Anyway, long story short, that moment when somebody looks you dead in the eye
yeah.
and says, you haven't earned my trust. I knew at that time, that very day, I went home and talked to my wife. I'm not going to
Hmm.
be in this job for long. And I
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
voluntarily left after I had to put in some more time, but I voluntarily left as
Yeah.
pretty much as soon as I could because of that exact moment. That's the destruction it can have to be a cynical not. I mean, it's getting me fired up just thinking about it. You could probably tell
Yeah.
just the moment of
It's good.
being
Yeah.
doing the opposite of what you just said. It makes to me absolutely no sense.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we generally understand it in some contexts, but somehow forget it in other contexts. And I think part of it is, let's say in the context of social media, toxic social media, the whole culture is so degraded there that, you probably are right to assume anybody that's sort of pops up and yells at you, you probably can't have a conversation with them because whatever, it's just a bad environment. But outside of those kind of edge cases, usually basically people are pretty decent. I also think there's an element of this that is also relevant in parenting, because we all know of people who have bad parents or had bad parents, who didn't trust them. And then because they aren't trusted, I mean, I think everybody's heard a teenager say, you know, well, it doesn't matter what I do, they're gonna think the worst anyway, so I might as well do the bad thing. And it's just like, wow, like that's really bad. Like that's really unfortunate, as opposed to, again, sort of almost like that first day employee who's a young person just starting, but to say to your teenager, like, yeah, all right, you asked that you want to go out, you're gonna go out and stay a little bit later than before. Yeah, I want you to do that. And I trust you. But you gotta, do it the right way. show me that I can trust you. You give that trust. And then if, whatever, they go out and they say, well, yeah, I'm telling a story from when I was a teen, actually, said to my parents, uh, my friends are going to go and see this movie and it doesn't get out till 10:30 and I know my curfew's 10, but can I stay out? They're like, yeah, yeah, just come home. And believe me, I came home right on sharp because I'm like, this is my chance, right? To actually nail this and earn brownie points and stay out till 10:30 and it's not going to be a big deal next time.
Hmm.
Brilliant. And then other kids are just like, yeah, well, my parent, 10 o'clock curfew, F them. And they're like, I'm going to stay out to midnight and see what they can do about it. Well, they can do a lot about it, right? And
Yeah.
they don't trust you then. And so that kind of thing of like in any family situation, probably their parents didn't say, I trust you. The parents was probably like on their case the whole time. Anytime you can just go, you know what? I want you to live up to it. I think you can do it. I trust you. You're going to do the right thing. Make me proud.
Yeah.
Wow, it's powerful.
You're a dad of three daughters, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm with you as also a dad of daughters that you I lead with trust. I openly use that exact phrase. I lead with trust. I trust you. I trust you. Now, different all of them have different personalities and different ways they
Yeah.
may push the limits, right? I'm sure the same with your three. Like just because they're related to you doesn't mean they're going to be all the same. In fact, they're like the opposite in some cases. So, how do you handle it when you lead with trust, you give trust,
Mm.
and they break it and they do something to go against it? This is, to me, I think one of the hardest parts of being a dad is
Yeah.
is you lead with it, you give it, and then it's broken. It's really, really tough. How do you manage that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of things to look at actually in that question is one, how do you manage it as the parent? But also, what advice would I give to a teenager in that situation? How do they manage it? Like they've done the thing, they broke the trust, right? Presumably there's going to be consequences for that. How should they think about rebuilding the trust, right? Most of it's really basic stuff, I think as a parent, hopefully you've sort of outlined, first of all, you've outlined a reasonable set of parameters, right? And so you're not saying, you know what, you're 16 years old, your curfew is 5 p.m. And you
Mhm.
can't call your friends. Like, no, you create a draconian household, then clearly you're going to have a lot of problems. But you've got reasonable rules and, reasonable privileges, and there will be levers to pull and things like that. And to say, you know what, like next time the answer is going to be no, right? You violated my trust. You went out with your friends, you came home drunk, right? And so there's going to be a period of time when you tell me you're going to go out with your friends, and I'm like, I don't want you coming home drunk. Maybe I'm just not going to let you go. Like maybe that's just not okay. You've disappointed me. That's actually the most terrifying and powerful word that a dad can say is I'm disappointed here. I trusted you and you didn't live up to it. And that's, you know, but it's none of this is one-off stuff, right? This has to do with building a culture at home, building a family life that's healthy. That's a lot of different pieces. I've got advice for everybody on it, but I'm not an expert. Like
Mhm.
any other dad, I'm just trying to get through life like everybody, trying to have a good family. And then for the teen, I think one of the things that to tie this back to the book, we've got on this great conversation about relationships and parenting, but like Francis Fry is a Harvard professor who had a huge job at Uber for a while when they had an enormous crisis of trust. Nobody trusted them. The drivers didn't trust them. Customers were losing trust. Regulators definitely didn't have trust. And one of the things she says is that people say, like it's a common kind of saying is, once you've broken trust, that's it. You can never get it back. And that sounds plausible to us, right? Oh, like, yeah. But no, is it really true? No, it's actually not true. She thinks companies can rebuild trust faster than you think. Um, in relationships, obviously, it depends on the context. If there's been infidelity in a marriage, maybe getting back to trust is really hard and impossible. I don't know. Well, like every situation is different. But in many, many cases, and I think with a teenager who's broken a rule, done something they shouldn't have done, they can rebuild trust pretty quickly. And our job is to let them rebuild that trust. And so if they like are genuinely say, you know what, I screwed this up. Here's why. Here's what happened. Here's what I'm going to do differently next time. And then, at the end of the book, we got the sort of secret eighth rule, which is we call it the meta rule because we even talked to the publisher about should we change it to the eight rules and well, we didn't want to. Everybody agreed seven sounds really nice. I don't know, something magic about the number seven. But the eight rule is basically and really do it, right? The rules of trust aren't just like uh, you know, a lot of good words. You actually have to walk the walk. And so if you say, you know what, I screwed up, you own that. The Airbnb story in the book is a good case of that. We screwed up. We didn't do it right. Here's the things we're changing, right? If it's just a bullshit press announcement and you go back to being the same as you were before, you're not going to rebuild trust. But if you walk the walk, people will see that and they'll be like, you know what? They really screwed that up, but they saw that it was a bad move and they changed a lot in the company. Sometimes change the CEO, whatever you have to do, and that's okay then. Like everything is fine. So in the Airbnb example, we just talked about this sort of incident where really early in the history of Airbnb, they had someone rented out their apartment and they came home and it was absolutely trashed. And Airbnb handled it very badly. They sort of got bad advice. They were stonewalling, didn't quite answer. You know, I, this is old-fashioned PR advice used to be just it's going to blow over. Don't say anything. You'll make the story bigger. In this era, that's often the wrong advice. Not saying anything just means it goes viral and everybody goes crazy because you've done this thing and you're not explaining yourself. So they just sort of like, that's it. We're gonna rip off the Band-Aid. They said, look, we screwed this up, and they did a lot. They did a lot of real things. They started, requiring ID from the people who are renting their apartments out. Seems obvious now. ID from customers, like, somebody should know who this person is. You're not an anonymous person who comes and stays in my house. I need to trust you. One way I can trust you is, the indemnity, the insurance basically for the owners. So that, yeah, like if somebody comes in and completely trashes your house, there's a substantial insurance policy to sort you out. Okay, that's important because if it's on me, I'm definitely not letting anybody rent my house. Like that's crazy. So it's that kind of stuff, and they walk the walk. And of course, obviously, Airbnb is massively successful. And like any big company, I'm sure somebody out there is going to be, down in the comments saying, but they did this terrible thing or whatever mistakes they made. But broadly, that story is super valid that you can rebuild trust, but you've got to really do the things.
Yeah, I feel like it's we can appreciate people who take ownership, especially when something goes wrong or when they've made a mistake.
Mm.
I think that's just it's a big deal for leaders too, because so this is a show about leaders and leadership, and all of us are humans, and all of us are going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I think the key learning here is how are you going to choose to respond when you do? Now, hopefully you're not lying intentionally, but maybe even if you do, or you do something else that breaks trust, how are you going to choose to respond is a big deal. I don't expect people to perfection. I want to give people second chance. I do.
Yeah,
and
sure,
and we want them to when we unfortunately mess up. Now, I think that's what it's all about from a leadership perspective is transparency, which you write about in the book. That's rule number 7. And making sure that you're not leaving people in the dark. One of the most frustrating things when I've been sports is my background. My kids play sports. And when I think about the biggest difference between the coaches they've played for and I've played for that have done really well, that really I think the girls respond well to, that's one of the biggest one is rule number 7 is the ones that are super secretive and are really poor communicators and don't let anyone know what's happening until like the second before the game starting. Everyone just up in arms. What's happening? We don't know. I don't know. And the results end up being worse versus the coaches who are over communicators and always let everyone know where they stand and what's happening and what's the plan. Again, this seems so basic as I'm saying it out loud, by the way, Jimmy. But that doesn't seem that hard to be transparent and to lay it all out there and to be a good communicator. Can you talk to me more about that rule number 7 and being transparent and how that builds. I mean, you talk about Harry Truman and Eisenhower and how that goes in the book, but how is transparency, or why is transparency so important?
Yeah, I mean, well, if people can see your workings, they can see what you're doing and how it works and all of that. It just gives them an assurance in the process. I mean, one of the things in the world of software is that open source software is incredibly transparent. Like you can download the source code and you can go through it line by line. And even if you don't download it and go through it line by line, which by the way, most people don't because they don't know how or like who's got the time. But the fact that it is there, that other programmers can go through it. Like if there's a problem, you can figure it out. And by and large, that has given rise to like quite a lot of trust. I mean, the whole internet's sort of based fundamentally on open source software. And so that's really, really powerful technique in that field and in obviously in many, many others. It's a really interesting thing because in some companies, in some situations, uh, you know, confidential information is also very important. So, transparency doesn't mean, oh, well, you're being suspicious and untrustworthy if you don't tell us absolutely every single thing about every single thing, because that's not necessary and it's not right. So it's about judgment calls, like what can we share? Uh, what would be helpful for us to share so that people can trust the whole process and all of that. That's huge. So, for example, like let's say you've got a hiring process and you've got a certain set of criteria you're going to go by and blah blah blah, all this. Well, if you are using that process, you can't obviously sort of on the internal company sort of network share the private notes and evaluations of every single candidate. That just wouldn't be appropriate. Somebody writes, you know what, actually bad attitude, whatever. Like, you don't need to share all that. Well, what do you need to share? You need to share that process. You need to say, well, like, here's the way we're making the decisions. Here's the things we're looking at. And then people can go, okay, I get it. Because otherwise, it's just like, I don't know, they're hiring someone new, and then bam, somebody new's here. I don't know how they got here. I don't know what choices were made. Let's pull back in your story. Had that hire worked and not blowing everything up, you might have gone out to everybody and said, you know what, this guy's fantastic. And guess what? He has less experience than who we thought we were going to get, but we thought these sort of attributes, being a good guy, overcomes that. And then people, they're like, oh, okay, like great, I understand that. Otherwise, if you were secretive, you're like, oh, it's a little embarrassing that he's not that experienced. So let's not talk about his experience. Let's actually cover up that he's not that experienced. Then people are going to go, who's this guy? He has no experience. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like that kind of thing. And again, I think as you keep saying, like all of this is pretty obvious, right? It's really a lot of it's what I would call like kindergarten ethics. It's like like one of the chapters is, the title is Your Mother Was Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like the stuff you learned as a little kid about common decency and building trust is actually like really important. It's correct.
Yeah, let's go to maybe a leader of a company, and I'm going to go to rule number 3, I believe. A strong, clear, positive purpose is essential for people to work together and make something wonderful. Again, these
Mm.
sound obvious, and yet there's still a giant need for a book like this because they don't happen. We know
Mm.
these things, but then why not? Why don't we execute on them? Why don't we do them? Why is it still so hard for people to execute on these things that seem fundamental?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. And I think that's part of the motivation for the book is to put this back in conversation, right? To sort of have that open conversation to go, you know what, look, it's very easy when we look at the state of the world to be just downtrodden, cynical, don't trust anybody. There's so many bad actors out there. There's, so much suspicion and hostility um, that the idea of giving somebody the benefit of the doubt, right, which we all think is probably the right answer in almost all cases, can get forgotten. And if we forget that, we end up in a really kind of a dark place. We it's sort of, if you think people on the other side from you politically, or people at your workplace, or whatever it might be, if you think they're fundamentally just rotten people, then you're going to have a hard time listening to them. You're going to have a hard time understanding where they're coming from. You're going to have a hard time just dealing with them in a successful manner, even for your own selfish reasons, right? Um, you're not going to do the right things that make sense to people. And that's a shame, and it hurts us all in society, right? How do we move forward? How do we build a more prosperous society? How do we, have successful entrepreneurs, successful businesses, successful people in jobs, instead of angry, unemployed people and industries failing and all of these kinds of things? If we can't sort of fundamentally come together and go, right, you know what? We're all in this together here on this little planet, and we've got to get on with it. And we better build a culture and a system that is about that, getting things done in a positive way, where we're lost. So.
Let's say, okay, I want to, let's get practical for a second. Let's pick an actual person, an avatar. Let's say this is a person who has been cheated on in a personal relationship and has had a boss who did not trust them and they didn't trust them. And let's say they had a friendship blow up because a friend lied to them, right? So this is a rough
Yeah,
combo here, right? But
yeah, yeah,
it's real
yeah.
life. It's real life, right?
In
There are
real life, it
people,
happens. Yeah.
this happens, right? That person, they look at this, they see the title of this episode is something to do with trust, and they say, I'm good. That's not how the world works for me. Maybe for Jimmy, not
Mm.
for me. But maybe they listen, or maybe they give it just a shot, right? What advice do you give to them? This person is down and out a bit, like, or at least they're
Yeah, yeah,
non-trusting because of life in a way has beat them up a bit. What
yeah.
what practical advice do you give to that person to try to turn it around?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, a big part of it is, so first of all, reminding people, like, you get into an elevator and nobody punches you, nothing bad happens, people are basically decent. You think about, all the different things that people could do that's bad that they don't do, and they don't do it because they're basically decent people. But those are just like ideas to sort of remind you, like, hold on a second, maybe there's better people out there. The other thing is, for some people, it's like really hard to recover from these things. So if you've had a really sort of bad, uh, work experience or a relationship experience, like, it's tough, right? And it's kind of hard to not draw the lesson of, like, people suck, right? And yet, I think it's a lot of it's just like, okay, right, like, change the conversation, change the situation, right? If you work somewhere where your boss doesn't trust you and your coworkers are all backstabbing freaks and whatever it might be, it's time to change the channel. Like, just every night you should be trying to find a better position, find a better job. And actually, your number one criteria in looking for that next position is going to be finding somebody who you think is a proper person to be your manager. It's like, think of it as you're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to do that. The same with your friends, if your friends suck, find some new friends, right? Now, I know that it's easy to say that in a very glib way, right? That's not really, uh, for everybody, the most immediately helpful advice, but bedrock truth, that's what you're going to have to do,
Yeah.
right? And how do you get there? It's like to say, like, you can be in a position in life where you're like, uh, I'm ambitious in my career. I'd like to move up the ranks. I'd like to make more money. I want to have a house and a family and all that. And there's all these obstacles in my way. And my dumbass friends just want to party every night. And it's really hard to break away from that. Well, you know what? Get some different friends if you have
Yeah.
to, right?
I,
And actually, frankly, what can often happen, this is along that give trust to get trust, right? You may be in a circle of friends who all are thinking the exact same things. They may be all thinking, you know what, this lifestyle isn't good. Like we're going out too much, partying, we've got too many cynical people. Actually, let's try and change it. And how do you do that? That's going to depend on the circumstances.
And the couple things here. I love that. When you become known as a person who gives trust before it's earned, you seem to magically attract trustworthy people.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah,
cool how it
totally.
works, right?
Totally.
If you're willing, will
Hmm.
you get burned every once in a while? Maybe. But you
Yeah.
seem to attract the type of people that you want to be around. And one of the things I found, Jimmy, if maybe someone's down or you went through a rough stretch, I think it's from rule number 2. I we as humans, we are born to connect and collaborate with others. I'd say get out there in the world, rub shoulders, and be curious. I found curiosity is the ultimate love language. Asking
Definitely.
people questions and being genuinely curious about their stories
Hmm.
and learning about them and asking follow-up questions and listening, I found is a great way to just show love and to connect with people. And when you find yourself in the midst of a curiosity conversation where everyone's kind of asking and learning and they're head nodding and they're into it and they give you good body language, I don't know if there's anything better, man. That's
Yeah, yeah,
human
yeah.
nature
Yeah.
connecting, and that's rule number 2 in the 7 rules of trust. That I'd love to hear a little bit more about how this is in our nature to connect and collaborate with others.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so easy and it's neither healthy nor unhealthy as a fact, right? Which is that it's quite easy and quite natural for people to fit into whatever culture is around them. And so, we talk about horrible cases of lynch mobs, right? Where people kind of go along with the mob because it's going in a certain way and they collaborate to do something terrible together. And so it's not automatically a good thing, but it's also an incredibly positive thing when it's put to the right purpose and you've got the right vibe and the right people and all of those things. So yeah, that it's really we naturally like to work together to build something good. And that can be almost anything, right? It can be in a social context, even I wanted to make clear, I do like a party, right? When I was talking about an example of friends who party too much, right? I do like a party. And what is that? Like, it's like, okay, we're all going to get together, right? And we're going to have a great time. And so what are we going to do, right? We're going to have a couple of beers. We're going to joke. We're going to laugh. We're going to have some music, right? We're going to maybe we'll have dinner and we'll have some conversation. Like we collaborate to build that experience
Mm-hmm.
together. None of us could do it on our own because let me tell you, a party with only yourself is not a party,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we all get that. And like you can just say, okay, yeah, as humans, we really like to we're social and we like to be social.
Yeah. One more, Jimmy, before we run, man. Let's say you're meeting someone a bit earlier in their career, maybe a college grad,
Mm,
and they want to leave a positive dent in the world, like you have
mm.
done and are currently doing. What are some general pieces of life/ career advice you'd give to that person?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is really important, and it's such a cliche, right? That you're almost embarrassed to say it out loud, but it's do what you love. Do something that you really care about. And, oftentimes for young people, it's sort of there's this struggle between here's the thing that I really want to be doing, and here's the thing that's going to make me some money.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those are legitimate goals, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, I want to do the thing I love, and I want to live a prosperous life, and I want, and so my answer is like, okay, first of all, work really hard to find a way to put those together. Look really hard for a way to have do what you love, make some money. If it's about make some money, it's like some money for what purpose? Like, so maybe what you need to do is go do that thing. You're going to make some decent money, but you're going to have an early retirement goal. Maybe not to completely retire, but to then change careers I always wanted to be, I'm going to make this up. Somebody says, actually, what would really make me happy in life is I want to be a first grade teacher, but I've also got this sort of opportunity to go and be a banker. at a top bank and I can make a lot of money. Okay, right. And you think you think the banking thing will be fun? Nope, nope. I'm going to hate every minute. Okay, so either go be a teacher. Like, don't worry about it. Like, money's not everything. Go have a great life. Go be a first grade teacher, or you kind of combine the two and you say, actually, I'm going to go off and do this banker thing. This is what my salary is going to be the first few years. I'm going to set a really clear goal, and I'm going to be careful about lifestyle inflation, all of this. And at some point, I'm going to say, thank you very much, bank. I got some kids waiting on me. Do that. Like, you can do that. It's an amazing thing. And so realistically, I think, when you're young and you've got many different opportunities in life, really think about that passion piece. Because if you're not passionate, right? Like, here's kind of the worst example. You go to work at a company, you're a top salesperson at the company and management level, and you get a new boss and he doesn't trust you and he won't let you hire the great salesperson you just met. And if you said, yeah, but you know what? I'm making a lot of money here and I don't want to give that up. And I'm not gonna, like, I'm gonna suck it up. I'm gonna hate every second of it. You know what? Nah, forget that. Like, you're not gonna be happy. And by the way, you're not gonna be as successful,
Right.
right? Chances are you're not actually going to make as much money doing that as you would if you went off and did something that you're really, really passionate about. Now, maybe first grade teacher isn't it, right? But if we're talking about young people, right, it could be, all kinds of things that, like I really want to run a restaurant. Okay, run a restaurant. You might own a chain of restaurants, right? And it's going to be a hard slog those first 3 years. It's really hard to make money as a restaurateur, but you might be able to do it. And so give it a go. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's it.
It's
Do something passionate.
I think the passion part is really big because one of my friends, Brooke Cup, says the way he defines passion is choosing extra work. If you don't really like the thing, you're not going to choose extra work. But when you do, you you choose extra work all the time. Like what I get to do now is writing and speaking and talking with smart people like you and being able to chase my curiosity. I want to choose extra work literally every day because it's so cool. It's so fun. It's awesome. And I know sometimes people do have to have a job and to provide and they may not love it. And I get that. I'm a realist too. But trying to find something where you can have a love in the work, that's how you get excellent at it versus, oh, this is a job that isn't cool with a non-trusting boss. I just don't think you can do that for long periods of time. You can do it for a little bit. Anybody can do anything for a little bit at a time. And I think that's the focus thing to think about. Jimmy, man, I really appreciate this. The book is called The 7 Rules of Trust, a blueprint for building things that last. I really appreciate you being here, man. I encourage everybody to read.
Had great fun. Yeah, brilliant.
And I'd love to continue our dialogue as we both progress, man.
Perfect. Lovely.
Awesome. Thank you so much.